ES Audio.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Dallaglio and welcome to my rugby podcast. Now, it's all about the Premiership this week. Of course, we had round 17. It's been an interesting round with a lot of very close games. And here with me to discuss it all, I've got Will Macpherson, our resident sports journalist from the Evening Standard, who's jetted in from Geneva, especially to be with us, plus a true rugby legend who appeared for London Irish on no fewer than 301 occasions. Yes, 301 matches for the men in green. It's, of course, Topsy Ojo. And from Bears Beyond the Gates podcast, it's Bristol fan Tony Cox. Gentlemen, a very warm good afternoon to you all. Topsy, I've got to give you the big, the big up here. Literally 16 years at London Irish, in which you scored, I think, 80 tries, 301 games. You won pretty much everything there is to win in the game. You made your England debut in 2008, scoring on your debut, and you played against New Zealand, I think. So did you score in that game, or was it just on your debut that you scored?
It was the 2 on debut in the first test, actually. So, yeah, couldn't replicate in the second, but I'll take that strike.
Well, listen, right. If you're going to announce yourself on the international stage, 2 tries against the All Blacks. Who were you playing? Who were you playing on the wing against? Just as a matter of interest.
Who's my opposite man? Sivivatu.
Oh,
was on one wing.
Glided past him a couple of times.
Yeah, he was there. They were all there. Carter played. Nonu played. I mean, they won, of course, but at least I had my little moment.
And listen, I know that you've obviously got a lot going on, so it's a great pleasure to. I feel like I'm two-timing you from your boyfriend David Flatman, because you're appearing with him quite regularly these days on ITV. The yin and the yang, good cop, bad cop. I don't know how you describe yourselves, but you're also working as an ambassador for London Irish and, of course, a trustee for the London Irish Foundation. You've got amazing little business on the side, and it looks like you're in some training kit there. So I'm assuming you've done a bit of coaching this morning.
Yeah, right, balancing a lot of plates. So I'd say my day job, I coach at St John's School over in Leatherhead. So do rugby when it's rugby season. I dip my hand in all sports, really. So we're in football term at the minute, and then athletics and tennis will come, and cricket will come after Easter. I enjoy coaching, really enjoy coaching. And I kind of said coming here, I wanted to be involved throughout the year. Just use me as you need me. So it's been going really well. Really enjoy that. It's nice to be out the rain at the minute because it's getting a bit cold.
But there we go. Will, talk to us. You are, as our listeners know, the sports journalist for the Evening Standard. You obviously focus your attentions on rugby around this time of year, but I presume you turned your phone off for the last week and had a week skiing somewhere.
I did, yeah. I managed to avoid the various storms, but I've come back to a garden fence that's been ripped down. So I haven't totally managed to escape the damage of those various storms. But yeah, I had a lovely week away, thank you. But enjoyed last week's podcast very much. I did manage to turn my phone on to listen to that.
Oh, good man. And anywhere nice? I mean, were you in? I mean, I was in Italy, and we'll get on to that in a second. But where did you manage to go to?
I was in France and managed to take in France's victory over Ireland in a French bar. So that was very enjoyable.
Good man. And Tony, we're obviously going to get on to your role with Bristol Bears in terms of the podcast. I'm sure there's a lot of fans that tune into that on a regular basis. It's the highs and lows of following any team, really, in rugby or in any sport where you see the swings and roundabouts from one season to the next. But what's been taking your eye, or what have you been casting your eye over sports-wise over the last couple of weeks? Are you a big international rugby fan, and you've been listening to the Six Nations?
Oh, absolutely. Love to watch England. Obviously, being so close to the border with Wales, keep a very interested in our eye there. Lots of great rivalry between clubs like Bristol and Bath and those teams in South Wales over the years. So, I like to keep in touch what's happening with the Six Nations. Of course, young Harry Randall getting his debut, Six Nations debut at least, against Italy last weekend, which was great for Bristol Bears fans.
Yeah, the only disappointment was he was taken off.
I know lots of us thought, why not give him the full game or 70 minutes? Obviously, Young's want to come on and get his equaling cap appearance, but we did, Marcus Smith, Harry Randall, give them the full 80, see what they can do.
Yeah, I was possibly a little bit harsh on England last week. I sort of listened to the podcast again, and I thought to myself, former player, played lots of poor games for England. I'm sure I've lost many games as well. But and Italy, you're kind of on a hiding to nothing. But I had to step in for David Flatman, Topsy. I don't know if you're aware of that. I've just arrived in Rome. I was settling into a lovely weekend away, Valentine's weekend with my wife. Took my son, and I got a phone call from ITV saying that Flats had got COVID, which I guess was a legitimate excuse. I mean, Flats he wouldn't turn down a weekend in Rome with the restaurants over there, would he really? So I stepped in for him, and I've got to say, impressive first half performance from England. They got the job done. A lot of positives. Harry Randall, Ellis Genge, I thought played magnificently well. Great to see Jamie George back to the sort of form we know he can show. Second half was a little bit turgid, sort of summed up by Ben Youngs replacing Harry Randall and driving an England line out forward 10 metres and then taking the ball and box kicking it to the Italian fullback, which kind of left me scratching my head at 26-0 up. But Tops, just give us a couple of lines on what you thought of that England performance last week and whether there were as many positives as people are making out.
Yeah, it was a really interesting one, wasn't it? You probably summarised it quite well. First half, great. Came out the blocks firing, kind of scored early, scored just before halftime as well to just, keep things a bit comfortable. And then you're hoping that they kick on in the second half and it just doesn't quite happen. And it takes a while to eventually break them down. And, I gave myself a minute afterwards to kind of think, right, what is going on? And I said, right, okay, 2 games on the road, lost the first one, won this with a bonus point. So puts them back in the mix, which is great. Okay, you would take that. You're now looking at kicking on to a next level and, there wasn't enough of that. Some of the changes, like if I think going forwards now, I think Dombrandt, Smith and Randall, very good. I think that axis needs to be exposed even more now in some of the bigger games coming forward. I think Jamie George is excellent. Again, just, smile on his face, just looks like he's enjoying himself. Obviously, challenge was thrown down to him.
Yeah.
And I think he's answered that. He's got himself back on form and borderline fighting Cowan Dickey now to be first choice again. I thought Maro was good as well. Just went about his business again, just, 6, just roam around and cause trouble and just get stuck in. And he did that. So I probably marked it like a 6.5 out of 10 in terms of, okay, job done, but it needs to go off a few.
Yeah, listen,
they probably need some reinforcements back, some consistency in terms of selections and combinations.
Yeah. Well, I said on the pod last week that for me, the 2 most vital ingredients in any winning team is trust and consistency. You've got to trust a group of players and you've got to be consistent with the messages you're telling them. And if I'm honest, I don't think England have always done that. They've got a coach who doesn't trust his players enough to keep the same combinations every week. He's almost become a tinker man, Now sometimes you have to make those changes, and I agree with that. But you've got to be consistent. And Eddie Jones is always looking to improve the team before they've learned what he's told them in the first place. So
it's 40 odd centre combinations, isn't it? So
yeah, and look, listen, we'll be positive. There's the likes of Courtney Laws, Manitou Alangi, and Joe Launchbury. You suddenly add them to your team, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the pod when we look forward to England v Wales at Twickenham. Just a quick line on the other game, Will, because obviously we discussed it on last week's pod. But what was the mood like in the Alps watching France against Ireland? Are they emphatically marching towards the Grand Slam?
Well, I think there was the acknowledgement that they think that was their toughest game of the championship. They've got to host England at the end of the tournament, which is obviously that we're all kind of building towards that now, I suppose. They're off to Murrayfield this weekend. I worry a bit about Scotland. I think they're looking suddenly a little bit undermanned. The injuries are racking up a bit for them. Jamie Ritchie, Ferguson, Johnny Gray now. So they Scotland's best team is a really good side. But you take a couple of those guys out, and I could see France handing it to them a little bit this weekend, which would be a bit of a shame for Scotland. I think there is a sense of that this is France's year to prove that this project really is worth something ahead of next year, and it was a triumphant mood after that victory for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about that, and we shall see how the next few rounds unfold. We're going to go straight to the Premiership action from the weekend, round 17, of course. Fascinating round. Worcester v Bristol, Bath Leicester, Quins Wasps, London Irish Saracens, Northampton Sale, and we finished on Sunday with Newcastle against Exeter. We're going to start with that game on Friday night, and we'll try and get both sides of the game because clearly we've got a lot of fans from all the clubs that hopefully tune in to this podcast. But Tony, really, from your point of view, another defeat for Bristol Bears. I mean, last week they were absolutely thumped, 49 points to 32 at home against London Irish, who we'll get on to with Topsy in a little while. But I guess going to Worcester, it's never an easy place, especially with Steve Diamond there now turning things around. But just from our point of view, what is going on at the Bears? They had a tough start to the season, but they're nowhere near where they were last season.
No, absolutely. It's difficult. I mean, we talk about this on the podcast most weeks this season. I mean, the first thing is basics, really. You will have seen in that first half the number of times we knocked the ball forward, forward passes, getting into good positions, and then maybe trying the little basketball pass or the chicken wing pass, when actually maybe just to take it to ground to get the platform built and actually to score some points. It was a slow start. We got ourselves back into the game. I think at a crucial point right on 40 minutes when we had an attacking line out on their 5 meters, and then just threw it long over the top of the line. And then it looked like we turned the corner. But then in that second half, we were poor. There's no other word for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they obviously were carving sides open last season. That real ability to find the spaces. They've always tried to keep the ball alive, haven't they? With Pat's philosophy. But I guess the hallmarks are that they seem to be easy to score against this season, which is always a bit of a worry. Last year they scored a lot of points, but they seem to maintain their defensive shape and their structure. And really, ever since that defeat against Harlequins at Ashton Gate in the semi-final. I mean, I don't know how much defeats hang over a certain team. Tops will have a view on this, but I don't think they've ever recovered from that game, both as a coaching group and as a playing group. I know that Pat has said, we put that to bed very, very quickly, but they seem to be leaking an awful lot of points. And, that would be a concern for me, when you're playing against any side, quite frankly.
Yeah, and again, I think it's because we cough up possession so much that we can't really build that momentum. As the best form of defence is attack, really. So if you keep the ball and keep it in their red zone, that's where the magic happens. I mean, a classic example as well. We with Sinclair away, we've got John Afoa injured. We haven't got the strongest of bench for the front row. And, the Northampton game at home, our pack was backpedaling. We were backpedaling against Worcester in this game. You start conceding penalties and it's very difficult to get on the front foot.
And Tops, quick word on Bristol before we go to Worcester. I mean, obviously no Harry Randall, no Andy Uren. They've got a bit of an injury crisis in key positions. But, I mean, do you see them sort of turning things around and climbing up the table?
I think it's going to be too tough. I think they're too far behind, conceded too many points. They're too far down the table. And I think, touching on what you said, I think there was a bit of a hangover coming into this season, which they could have got over with results, with confidence, with belief. But you add into the injuries, you also add in an increased error count. Their game plan is built on high skill, high execution. And if they don't have that, they'll get put under pressure and they'll get punished, like we've seen a lot this season. And then you take away the star names that delivered that, it becomes a bit of a spiral. So that's where they're really struggling. They don't have the confidence, the belief, or the players on form that they did to execute their game plan week on week.
Well, Tony, we'll get on to your podcast after we've discussed the games. I'm interested to hear what Bristol fans, where they're sort of pointing their frustrations and anger. But Steve Diamond, I don't know whether you've ever interviewed him, but he's obviously quite a character in the game. I played against him for many years. He's obviously worked pretty much all over the world and at every single club. Not quite sure whether he left Sale on the terms that were reported in the newspapers, but he's landed at Worcester. He seems to have got rid of the people he wanted to get rid of, rather unceremoniously. Jonathan Thomas shown the door after doing a pretty good job, and he's kept hold of one or two other coaches. But I don't know if you saw, he gave a pretty frank interview about what he intends to do to make them tough to beat at home. He said, we've got a wonderful back line, but he said we we need a bit more power up front. And you know, whatever people think about him, whether it's a short-term fix, whether it's a long-term fix, they were on a run of 5 losing Premiership games, and he, you know, he's had an instant impact there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Diamond, everyone knows exactly what he's about. He's so uncompromising. He's a hard rugby man, and he'd become kind of synonymous with Sale. He'd done just about every job. I think he was even acting chief executive at one stage. He's done, you know, from top to bottom, and he was so strongly associated with that club that when he left, he was going to have to take some time out of a game, and he has done, and he's come in at Worcester, and his fingerprints are all over them already. As you say, that tough interview, that beautiful backline was on show within 5 minutes of a game beginning, wasn't it, with Van der Merwe's lovely try from that beautiful kick. That's a massive win for them. You could see the emotion when the final whistle went from those players. They needed to snap that losing run, and they have. And they've just pulled away from Bath a little bit at the bottom of the table. Not that it means that much down there this year compared to other years. They've given themselves a bit of breathing space, especially with Newcastle not getting the win yesterday. So that was a massive result for Worcester, and maybe exactly the kind of, you know, the first step on the path that Diamond's trying to set them on.
Yeah, like you say, he doesn't mince his words. I think he brought all the players in and said, you're all on notice, basically. You've got the next 6 weeks to prove that you're part of my plans moving forward. I think he was particularly looking at the forward pack. So we'll keep a very close eye on Worcester. Now, moving on to what was probably another stunning result across the weekend, London Irish 32, Saracens 30. I mean, you know, talk about a team that is really on the up, playing with confidence, playing some outstanding rugby, actually winning games as opposed to losing them in the final few minutes or drawing them. And who better placed than a man who spent 16 years at London Irish to talk us through it. Topsy, it's just superb. I mean, is it the stadium? Is it the coaching? Is it the players? Is it a combination of all of those things? They've obviously got that young academy with the likes of Hassel Collins and so many others, Ben Loader playing brilliantly, bit of experience in their team as well. And let's be honest, you know, some coaches who have been around the block who know what they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's come over a long time as well, because if you think back the opening 8-9 round, mostly losses and draws. I think they only won one game early on. So this has been building for a while, and almost, you know, the opposite to maybe where Bristol are now. Having done it on a few occasions, they've built up a confidence and a resolve whereby they go for the 80 minutes. And, you know, they attack Saracens. Their attack is flourishing as well, scoring a load of tries, conceded as well. Saracens got back in, got within a whisker of winning the game, and Irish were able to come back and rescue it at the death. And I think having been through those experiences now, there is a belief that, you know, they're never beaten. And that's very evident now, whether it's home or away. You know, you look at some of the draws, you look at the home wins. You touched on the home stadium. I think they're building something really good there. Nice new stadium, building a new fan base, and the rugby they're playing is helping grow that as well, which is really good. So they're just confident at the moment, enjoying their rugby, winning different ways as well, and it is standing them in good stead. I mean,
there's very little to choose between. I think it's Harlequins in 4th place, right the way down, I think, to Exeter. I mean, I think there's literally about 7 or 8 points separating all those teams. So it's maybe a bit premature, but as we're going into round 18, I mean, Irish are the sort of team you don't want to be playing against right now. I mean, do you genuinely think that they can make the playoffs and potentially push for further honours?
Yeah, I think so, because, you know, they've almost earned the right to be in that mix. And you look at that cluster of teams. I mean, almost every game now going forwards could potentially be a knockout game. You know, I think Irish play Leicester and Sale very soon as well. You're thinking, right, one wing and you're leapfrogging the other or dropping down. So it's become a very, very tight. I think Irish play Harlequins start of April as well. They play Northampton end of March in their Paddy's Day game. So you're taking on teams in and around you, and it could be the difference between finishing top 4 or not. So big games on the horizon, but with their form and confidence, you wouldn't bet against them sneaking in.
Well, Will, I'm going to move on to Harlequins against Wasps. I'm assuming you have grabbed the opportunity of that streaming service that the Premiership Rugby are now offering to view all of these games. I guess Quins, a team you cover more than most, against a team you probably used to cover more than most. They'll just be happy to get back to winning ways, won't they, Harlequins? They were on a 3-match losing streak. Quite surprised to see Joe Marler ask for permission from Eddie Jones to leave the England training camp to go back to play for Harlequins. Obviously, a good relationship with his coach there, and sounds like Wasps, who have had a lovely little run themselves, beating some of the top teams, just left it a little bit late or conceded too many points a little bit too early. But Quinn's sort of back on track, and I guess it's important for them that they stay in and around that top four while they're missing the likes of Don Brandt, Smith, and a few other players.
Yeah, exactly. Quinn's are kind of a victim of their own success this year, and that they're losing players to England duty or international duty more generally that they wouldn't have done in previous years if these guys, as you mentioned, Smith and Don Brandt, develop and become England internationals. They're going to have to get used to life without them. I thought it was actually a hell of a result for Quins to win that game. As you say, Wasps came in form. They've got a few players coming back, but Quins kind of showed off the best of their attacking game. They've got this kind of endless supply of wingers, haven't they? Liner coming off the bench and scoring that cracking try. But Esterhazen was so central once more. He kind of, even when he hasn't got Smith inside him, he and Kerr seem to link up so well. So that was a really, really important result for Quins, even if they scored 5 tries, only got 2 conversions. They didn't get as many points from a boot. They might have thought that they could be a bit further ahead of Wasps, who mounted a pretty spirited comeback at the end. Yeah,
and listen, great to see Jack Willis back on the field. I think he played nearly a half of rugby. I mean, it's no surprise that Lee Blackett and John Mitchell and that Wasps team have suddenly started to put some results together with the likes of Fekitoa, Launchbury, Barbary, the Willis brothers coming back from injury. But I think it was nearly a year to the day that Jack Willis was injured in that tackle from Negri. So, credit to him for the journey that he's been on. Obviously a massive positive that he's back on the field. Tony, I'm going to come to you. I'm hoping you might have caught up with some of the highlights on BT Sport, but Northampton Sale, again, another extraordinary result, really. And I suppose similar to Wasps, Alex Sanderson is sort of getting 1 or 2 players back from injury, notably a few South African players, and managed to hold on for a 1-point victory. What did you make of that game?
Yeah, absolutely. You can see the likes with Faf de Klerk coming back. Tuolagi, I know he's got off to England now, but that was a really good win. And as Bristol fans, we faced Sale over 2 games in the Champions Cup, and I'll be honest, we're not looking forward to that. Maybe a few weeks ago we thought that was an okay draw, but that's going to be tough. No, I mean, just as you've all said, that top 9 is just incredibly close, and I think Sale will be right there in the mix now, right there in the mix come the end of the season.
Tops, just on that, we had scrum half Alex Mitchell up against Rafi Quirk. Obviously, we've got Ben Youngs, who's still going strong, about to break the record with England, probably against Wales. And young Harry Randall. I mean, where do you sit with the guys that sit just behind, those that are in Eddie Jones's squad? I mean, Quirk and Mitchell, going head to head, 2 very talented players.
Yeah, it was a good battle. And it's great that we have that quality now. I mean, I'd be happy with either one of them starting a test match as it goes. Very good. I'm happy to see Randall play, Quirk as well, all scrapping to kind of get in and be that next 9. And I think they need to be exposed more because, Ben Young's been incredible. He'll break the record, 115 caps. And then after that, is it Harry Randall with 5 or 6 next behind him? So that
I don't think Eddie Jones knows. And I mean, to be honest with you, it could be one of the reasons why we weren't able to do that well in Japan, because he ended up flying his 3rd choice scrum half out the week of the final. So is that bad luck, or is that bad planning?
Yeah, a bit of both, I'd say. I mean, that's 100 odd caps between your first choice and whoever your second choice 9 is far too many. So we need to see more of these guys, the rest of the 6 nations going forwards as well. But I mean, it's great, talking about Sale, the fact that now they've got Faf to pick from and Rafi, both incredible 9s, playing well, getting fit players back at the right time of the season. I mean, it's brilliant. And, having watched that game, Sale probably shouldn't have won. But again, when things are going your way and you're on a good run of form, you get Northampton missing that last kick of the game and you ride your luck and you move on to the next round.
And I guess, Tony, from your perspective, the sight of AJ McGinty, who's clearly a very important player for Sale, and is on his way to Bristol. I mean, I bet Bristol fans are quite looking forward to, to having someone that's maybe a little bit calmer with a bit of experience there, and certainly knows how to get the best of those around him.
100%. When that was announced, it was, we went on the kind of fan boards for sale, and they couldn't believe that they were letting McGinty go, obviously not knowing that it would follow up with a few days later that Ford was around him. But definitely, Callum Sheedy's done a great job for us over the years. But to have someone of McGinty's experience and that little bit of magic, where I think, Callum executes the game plan that Pat wants to play brilliantly, but that little bit of maverick, to see the opportunity to run a bit more with the ball, maybe a slightly better kicking game. I think that's really going to help us next season.
And listen, I'm going to stick with you because it's your nearest rivals, Bath, who you've got to be said are improving, but still not able to get over the line. I couldn't believe that stat that Leicester haven't won down at the Rec for that many years. They seem to have won everything for so many years. But obviously they'd be pleased to get that monkey off their back. But I guess some encouraging signs with the likes of Falatau. Having said that, he'd probably be joining up with the Wales squad now that he's fit again. But some encouraging signs for Bath. But ultimately it was Leicester that prevailed.
Yeah, and our nearest and dearest. I can't say that we shed too many tears when Bath were beaten. We've lent them Nathan Hughes to try and give them a little bit of help. But in all seriousness, now I think things look like they're starting to come together at Bath. One or two players, as you say, coming back. And West Country Rugby, Bristol, Bath, Gloucester, we love it, and we want to see all three teams doing well. So I do hope that Stuart Hooper and Bath can really start to turn a corner now.
Yeah, Leicester just powering on, only 2 defeats in the league, and then yesterday, I wouldn't say I was glued to my television screen, but I was just lucky that I just drew the short straw and didn't end up in Newcastle with I think it was Nick Mullins and Ben Kay up there, but. Newcastle just losing out on a match to Exeter, and I guess Tops for them it's quite an important game, Exeter, because they've lost their way of late, and they're obviously not they're in a very unfamiliar territory in terms of their chasing now to try and make that top 4. So they would have been desperate just to pick up points, particularly on the road in a tough place like Newcastle.
Yeah, I mean that was a huge win for them, especially they were up a man for majority of the game as well. I think Callum Chicksaw read very early on. And it looked like Newcastle were going to pull it off as well up until the last few minutes. So, I mean, big for Exeter in terms of, again, it's been a tough year. Again, players not in form, injuries, not having maybe that aura that they used to have, teams going down to Sandy Park and winning, them going away and struggling. So any sort of win is great for them. Getting through this Six Nations period and just giving themselves a chance. Like I say, they've got a lot of work to do, but as we've seen with the likes of Sale and Wasps, they get their first choice team back for a run-in through April and May. You never know. You wouldn't write against them going on a bit of a run, but they have got a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. And listen, we're going to move in. I mean, that rounds up all of the games from round 17. And I'm going to ask you who you thought was the outstanding player of round 17 in the Premiership. And you can be as one-eyed, as biased as you like. It could be a London Irish player, Tops. It could be a Bristol player, but it won't be Tony.
Sorry, Tony.
it could be a coach. I'm gonna kick things off, and slightly sentimental and one that's close to home. I think we have, for me, just to see Jack Willis back on the rugby field after a year. I mean, I went through a similar operation, but I think he's had a lot more complications. This is not the first time, but maybe the second time he's had to deal with that in his career. All that hard work, he's had a few setbacks along the way, and I think just to finally see him back on the field with his brother playing a half of rugby, just deserves a little bit of extra recognition, because Tops, you've been there as a player. We all know what it's like when you have these injuries, mentally more than anything else. It's such a challenge for you. So well done to him. Must have been a relief for everyone around him, particularly his parents, just to see him come off the field. He's just had a son named after my son Enzo, so he can do no wrong, the lad. So he is my outstanding player of the week. And as I said, you can be as one-eyed as you like. But Tony, who are you going for?
Well, I must admit, I'll fess up here. I've seen highlights of most of the games, but not much of the other games. So it's difficult for me to pick someone out. So I am going to be a little bit Bristol biased. It's a mention in dispatches rather than player of the round. And that's Johan Lloyd, because the guys played 11, 12, 14 and 15 this season. Of course, we've had the curse of the scrum halves. And he had to stand in at 9. And I don't know if those of us that watched the Worcester game, he was having to ask Wayne Barnes, is it all right if I stand here when, on their put-in? So Johan Lloyd, I think he'll be cutting the grass and washing the shirts next. He's doing everything at Bristol. So hats off to Johan Lloyd. Brilliant.
Couldn't think of great spot there. Tops, are we going to go London Irish? I mean, please say we should, really, because they were... I mean, that chap Van Rensburg's got to be up for a shout, hasn't he?
You read my mind. He was going to get a mention, definitely. I mean, yeah, he's been incredible. Obviously, last had the Bristol game, but this weekend in particular against Saracens, his lines of running as a 12 in terms of being a focal point, just taking on that hard work, but also his work rate around the pitch. I mean, he's the first carry off a line-out or scrum, and then he ends up scoring on the wing. So the way that Irish are now using him and playing around with him, he's becoming a very central figure in the team. He wasn't going to be my player of the round. He was just going to get a nod. But if you want me to give it to him, I can. That's fine. I'll go.
No. Don't be put under any pressure.
What I was going to say, he was one name I wanted to touch on. Trevor Davison, Newcastle, had an incredible Sunday, 14 men. My player of the round, it was actually going to be Duan van der Merwe. I just think coming back from international duty when Worcester needed a performance, he stepped up, and that's what you want your big money signings to do. So there you go. There's 1, 2, 3.
Exactly. Don't be influenced, but go with the winger. All right. That's perfect. and Will, other than your ski instructor, who else was outstanding this weekend?
Well, I'm gonna spin off your one a little bit, if that's all right, Lawrence. Obviously, Jack Willis' story was unbelievable. And it was great to see him back getting a turnover as well in his little cameo on the field. But actually, my outstanding player is Tom Willis. At the moment, he's still kind of talked about as Jack Willis' brother, I think. I don't think we'll be doing that for long. I think they'll both play for England. I hope they'll play for England together. He was immense for Wasps on Saturday. I think he beat more defenders than any other player this weekend. So I'm going to give it to Tom Willis. He's going to step out of Jack's shadow over the next few years, I think.
Well, there's certainly a lot of good number 8s in the country, but he does feel like a natural number 8 as opposed to one that's been asked to play there. And we're going to stick with you, Will. Not that you've had much time to get your feet under the desk, but what are the kind of big sports stories that are that are coming across the desk this week? Maybe either within rugby, which I'm assuming is building towards who's going to be turning out in the Six Nations at the weekend, but maybe just generally across the sports desk.
Yeah, it was another busy weekend of Premiership action, wasn't it? Or Premier League action, I should say. We talked about the Premiership, Premier League action. England's cricketers are off for their next beating this week. They're going to the Caribbean.
No, surely no more cricket on TV.
It's relentless. They leave on Thursday for that. But yeah, I think it's all eyes on the Six Nations this weekend, isn't it? I mean, England, to me, feel like they've stuttered a little bit in the first 2 rounds, but the cavalry's kind of coming back. Manu Tuolangi, Courtney Laws is going to be available. Joe Launchbury, I would expect to be involved this weekend. And suddenly you're kind of seeing the shape of that side rebuild a bit. It's been, as you mentioned, Eddie's become a kind of tinker man. Week to week, you never know quite what he's going to do, but I think they'll have a bit of a more familiar shape this week. And I really hope that when Eddie Jones names his team on Thursday, he kind of sticks with some of those combinations that are building really nicely. We mentioned Harry Randall, Marcus Smith as a pair, Don Branton Smith as a pair, Slade and Smith as a pair are building really nicely. And I thought Max Malins came off his wing and worked really well with Smith against Italy as well. So I hope all of those guys get a start. And I think Tuolangi will bring that focal point back to their attack this weekend, which is great.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that 2 of Eddie Jones's best ever performances as England coach have coincided with Tuolangi being available for selection. When's that team announced, by the way?
It'll be Thursday, I think about 11:30.
Okay, well, listen, we're all ears for that. Tony, your time has come. Bears Beyond the Gate. This is a podcast hosted by yourself along with your mates, Lee, Pete and Miles, all season ticket holders, probably have been for a very, very long time, all live in the BS3 postcode. What's so special about BS3 is that it must be quite close to the stadium, no doubt. So you're showing your true allegiance. Give us a little bit of an insight into your pod, why you do it, what sort of relationship you have with the club. Do you manage to get the players on? Are they running for the hills at the moment because results are not going with them and you can't find anyone to come on as your guest, or are they facing up and fessing up to what's good and what's bad?
Gosh, that's a lot of questions in one go, Lawrence. Let me see if I can get through them. BS3, that's where Ashton Gate is, just south of the river in Bristol. We started the podcast. I've for years been a big West Ham fan, and I was listening to a West Ham podcast because I can't get to London that much to see games. And I always felt closer to the club because you could get a fan's perspective rather than what you see on the telly or read on the papers. So I said to the guys after one game, let's start a Bristol Bears podcast. Nobody was doing it. So we gave it a go. First one, sat around my kitchen table, didn't really know what we were doing. Probably the sound quality was terrible. We expected a couple of dozen people to tune in. And then I think we had about 200 people after the first 24, 48 hours. So we've just done our 101st episode last night.
Wow.
We set out from the very first, to be very clear, it's a fans podcast. So we weren't going to get too close to the club because we wanted to keep that independent view. Having said that, we've had Pat Lamb on. Pat came on for our 50th episode. I did joke to him that if he wanted to come back for the 100th, he'd have to win another trophy because we just won the European Challenge Cup. He didn't, so I was true to my word. And we had Joe Joyce, the King of Southmead, one of our Bristolian heroes, come on for the 100th edition. So we do get players on. We've got a great relationship with the club, and they're always very happy to help us. But it's really about the fans and the fan perspective and being a voice for fans locally.
And listen, well done, because you answered all of that and more. Speaking about the fans, obviously, we've all been through the highs and lows of following our clubs respectively. Well, what's the feeling? Are they a patient bunch at Bristol Bears, or are they starting to get a little bit impatient and a little bit upset with results and the way things are working out?
Well, I think, just to put the context of probably the last 25 to 30 years for Bristol, we lived in the shadow of Bath in the 80s and 90s. The club nearly went out of business in the late 90s. We had that near a decade in the wilderness in the Championship. Yes, we've had a bit of glory over the last 2 or 3 seasons, but I think Bristol fans are really realistic. I think when we reflect back on last season, we probably overachieved. There were lots of games that we won right at the death, were very close. Having said that, we have definitely underachieved this season. So I think people are starting to, expectations have grown, and people want to see us, first and foremost, win games. And I think to win games, we do need to maybe have more of a plan B and plan C rather than, this all action running game that Pat's instilled. It's great when it works, but unfortunately it's not working as often as it did over the last couple of years.
No, here. And Topsy and I are probably slightly old enough to remember playing games down at the Memorial Ground, actually. And there's so many wonderful names: Paul Hull, Ralph Nibbs, Derek Eves, Sharpie, Mark Regan, Simon Shaw. So many great players have played in that sort of era. Did you have Derek Eves was always a player that I loved playing with and against, to be honest with you. He was a real warrior for his club, captained it superbly. God knows what he's up to these days, but I'm sure he's in good spirits. Did you have a favourite player of that particular era?
The two that stood out for me that I love seeing play together was Pichot and Contaponi in the early noughties. World-class players playing in the blue and white hoops for Bristol. Of course, another favourite was Regan, Mark Regan. I love the chat that you always got standing on the West Terrace. You know him better than I do, but he seemed to be non-stop talking in that scrum.
Yeah, no, he certainly did. He used to come out with some lovely lines. I think he was explaining his education. He said he got a D in maths and he cheated. So I can't quite understand what he was on about, really. But he He's a top guy. Listen, we're going to move on. Listen, we wish you all the very best for that podcast, Tony, and we'll certainly be tuning in. And, if there's ever an opportunity, maybe before a Wasps game or an England game, I'd be very happy to come on the pod and return the favour. But we are now going to move to our competition where we'll test the rugby trivia knowledge of, either myself, which is non-existent, but certainly Tops, on are over the line or in the bin. Now, we know that Top scored 80 tries over the line, and wasn't quite as many times as I was in the bin, but not far off. So, Will, over to you for over the line or in the bin.
Thanks, Lawrence. Yeah, you know how this works by now, but just to explain to any new listeners, I'm going to give you a piece of rugby trivia, and you have to decide if you think it's true and therefore over the line, or false and thus in the bin. So here goes. Leicester Tigers are still comfortably top of the Premiership table after this weekend's action. The team are famous for their green, red and white jerseys, which they've been wearing since 1895. But when the club was first formed back in 1880, their original jerseys were black and orange. Is this over the line or in the bin? I'll come to Tony first, then Topsy, then Lawrence last.
I'm guessing with Leicester Tigers, that's over the line. I reckon that was the original strip.
Topsy?
I'm going to go in the bin.
Was it black and gold, did you say?
Black and orange.
Black and orange, yeah. Sounds plausible, sounds believable, doesn't it? So it might have to be over the line for me.
Is in fact in the bin. Well done.
Oh no, Topsy, what man?
The original club colours were just black, and their nickname was the Death or Glory Boys. Mainly glory this year, though.
Well, listen, as usual, if you're a London Irish follower, they're unstoppable at the moment. So Topsy, well done on winning that.
I'm here all week.
Sure, it means a lot to you. Actually, your first game was against Wasps. I hope I wasn't playing in that. I think you scored 2 tries on debut.
I think it was what was the old Power Gen Cup. So I think it was the weekend off for you.
You obviously beat us anyway.
We lost by a point, but I scored. I think got that right. Yeah.
Well, listen, we are going to take a look. We may have touched on it already, but we're going to have a look at the matches coming up this weekend in round 3 of the Six Nations, a really crucial sort of pivotal round for everyone, quite frankly. Scotland play France. France think they've already played their toughest game against the Irish, but the trips to Murrayfield are never easy. And of course, England play Wales, and you'd like to think with Ireland and France in the next up for England, this is a game they have to win and to give themselves a bit of confidence for the rest of the title. And then Ireland host the Italians in Dublin. So where do we start, Tops? I'm going to start with you. Scotland, France. How do you see that one, working out? Finn Russell, as good as he was against England, and he was exceptional. I mean, if you put a highlights clip of his together in the next game against Wales, I'm not sure he'd be particularly pleased with his own performance. So a bit of a come down for the Scots. Can they bounce back?
Yeah, chalk and cheese, isn't it? 0 to 0 in a week. It's tough, especially looking at their injury list now. I'm like, right, you're just starting to chip away at what made them so good in week 1. That being said, I think we see in the Six Nations, home advantage gives you a response, especially off the back of a losing performance. And as much as France are in a great spot, playing fantastically well, superstars everywhere, if there was almost ever a chance for Scotland to step up and turn them over, it could be this weekend, given what has happened recently. And so I'm going to go out there and say I think Scotland will sneak this one. I don't know how, but I can see them getting over the line.
I'll tell you how. They did it last season. They beat England last season. They beat France last season, and they lost the other. They lost to Wales and Ireland. So they've got it in their locker to beat the big, to beat the sides that maybe they're not fancy to beat, and lose the other ones. So that's a big and bold call. Let's hope there's no more Storm Eunice up in Murrayfield.
No, they'd take that though. They'd love it. They'd say, bring everything. We're at home. Bring all the elements you've got. We've got this. Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting a response, definitely.
And just a quick one from you on England. I mean, obviously, the cavalry, Willis said, will come back. Courtney Laws, we expect to play again. Joe Launchbury might even come into contention, having He's let Nick Ezekwe go, so I think he's pretty confident on his second row partnership. And then, of course, the big news will probably be Tuolangi finally playing in the centre and finally allowing Slade probably to do what he's very good at, which is not trucking the ball up into midfield.
Yeah, definitely. I think there should be, hopefully, please, Eddie, a better balance to the England team this weekend. I mean, it's going to be a brilliant game. I mean, almost the opposite to Scotland. 2 games away from home, back at Twickenham, big crowd. Again, great opportunity for Wales to kind of come and storm the place with all their injury problems. But I like to think England will say, right, okay, we're back now. We've had our win. We've got players back. We're in good form. Let's put in a performance. So I see England winning that one.
And Tony, for you, a word on England-Wales. I mean, Dan Biggar, outstanding again. You know, really, really a player that, I mean, I'm not supposed to like Welsh rugby players, but I really do like him. It's something, you know, you'd want him in your team. You know, he's one of those kind of players that really stood up and performed. They've got so many injuries, haven't they, across the board with some of their experienced players out. But again, it is England, the team that they love to beat. But can you see an upset here, or do you think England will produce their best performance of the championship so far?
I think they will. I agree with Topsy. I think 2 away games coming back to Twickenham, 80,000 in there. You know, Wales will always be up for that trip, but I think we will just have too much in our locker. It will be tight, but I think England will win.
And Will, I mean, obviously I've just come back from Rome and people should be careful what they wish for. I was thinking, would I prefer to fly back from Rome or Tbilisi in next year's Six Nations Championship? And there appeared to be a lot of very happy rugby fans enjoying the delights of Rome. But the Italians travelled to Ireland. And as much as Ireland will be disappointed with the way that they lost to France, the rugby, for me, was at a slightly different level in that game than anything we've seen in the championship so far. And they really are a side that, albeit, France ended their 9-match winning streak, but they really are a side that seem to know the direction that they're travelling in. You know, they're very settled team. There seems to be competition, you know, right under every single position, with guys that have got a lot of caps being left out the team. So, you know, they're in a good place at the moment, aren't they? And I would imagine that they'll do to Italy what England were unable to do, which is put on a lot of points.
Yeah, I expect so. I don't think that Italian losing run is gonna end this weekend. I expect it to go on to 35. Ireland look such a well-oiled machine, as you say. They've got so much experience, so many guys with caps. I think James Lowe's back in the squad as well this weekend to provide a bit of competition to Mac Hansen, who's come in and made such an impact. I think Sexton will probably be back as well. I think both weekends so far of the championship, Italy have played on the Sunday and have been pretty well beaten overall. I think that they're playing on Sunday again this weekend. I think it'll be even heavier this time.
Well, listen, Topsy's gone for 3 home wins with Scotland. I have to say that I think France have probably got just enough to sneak it. I think they've their forwards, the likes of Woki and Aldrich, might just do enough. And I think I'll agree with both yourself and Tony that England and Ireland will take the spoils at Twickenham and in Dublin, respectively. That's all for the episode of Lawrence Dallaglio's Rugby Podcast. My thanks to Topsy Ojo, Tony Cox, Will Macpherson. Tony, please make sure that the Bristol Bears don't turn things around in time for Wasps next weekend. May the run go on. But listen, we wish you all the very best with the podcast. Thanks for coming on the show, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed listening. And if you have, please make sure you give us a little like and a subscribe so you don't miss any more episodes. See you next week.